everybody. Welcome back to Carrie's Corner, where we are continuing our read of The Wind in the Willows. I think this is day 11, so it's part 11 of The Wind and the Willows by Kenneth Grahame, illustrated by Eric Kincaid. And we are starting in the middle of the chapter of Toad's adventures, where he landed in jail and the daughter is helping him out. Her father replied that she could do what she liked with him. He was tired of Toad and his sulks and his airs and his meanness. So that day she went on an errand of mercy and knocked at the door of Toad's cell. "Now cheer up, Toad," she said coaxingly on entering, "and sit up and dry your eyes and be a sensible animal, and do try and eat a bit of dinner. See, I brought you some of mine, hot from the oven." It was bubble and squeak between two plates, and its fragrance filled the narrow cell. The penetrating smell of cabbage reached the nose of Toad as he lay in his misery on the floor. It gave him the idea for a moment that perhaps life was not such a blank and desperate thing as he had imagined. But still he wailed and kicked with his legs and refused to be comforted. So the wise girl retired for the time, but of course a good deal of the smell of hot cabbage remained behind, as it will do. And Toad, between his sobs, sniffed and reflected, and gradually began to think new and inspiring thoughts of chivalry and poetry and deeds still to be done, of broad meadows and cattle browsing in them, raked by sun and wind, of kitchen gardens and straight herb borders and warm snapdragon beset by bees, and of the comforting clink of dishes set down on the table at Toad Hall, and the scrape of chair legs on the floor as everyone pulled himself close up to his work. The air of the narrow cell took on a rosy tinge. He began to think of his friends, and how they would surely be able to do something, of lawyers, and how they would have enjoyed his case, and what a fool he had been not to get in a few. And lastly, he thought of his own great cleverness, and all that he was capable of if he only gave his great mind to it, and the cure was almost complete. When the girl returned some hours later, she carried a tray with a cup of fragrant tea steaming on it, and a plate piled up with very hot buttered toast, cut thick, very brown on both sides, with the butter running down through the holes in it in great golden drops, like honey from the honeycomb. The smell of that buttered toast simply talked to Toad, and with no uncertain voice, talked of warm kitchens, of breakfasts on bright frosty mornings, and of snug parlor firesides on winter evenings. Toad sat up on one end once more, dried his eyes, sipped his tea, and munched his toast, and soon began talking freely about himself and the house he lived in and his doings there, and how important he was, and what a lot of his friends thought of him. The jailer's daughter saw that the topic was doing him as much good as the tea, as indeed it was, and encouraged him to go on. "Tell me about Toad Hall," she said. "It sounds beautiful." "Toad Hall," said Toad proudly, "is a self-contained gentleman's residence, very unique, dating in part from the 14th century, but with every modern convenience, up-to-date sanitation, 5 minutes from church, post office, and golf links, suitable for—" "Bless the animal," said the girl, laughing. "I don't want to take it. Tell me something real about it. But first, wait till I fetch you some more tea and toast." Looks like she did it. She tripped away and presently returned with a fresh trayful, and Toad, pitching into the toast eagerly, his spirits quite restored to their usual level, told her about the boathouse and the fish pond and the old walled kitchen garden, and about the pigsties and the stables and the pigeon house and the hen house, and about the dairy and the wash house and the china cupboards and the linen presses, she liked that bit especially, and about the banqueting hall and the fun they had there when the other animals were gathered around the table. And Toad was at his best, singing songs, telling stories, carrying on generally. Then she wanted to know about his animal friends, and was very interested in all he had to tell her about them, and how they lived, and what they did to pass their time. Of course, she did not say she was fond of animals as pets, because she had the sense to see that Toad would be extremely offended. When she said good night, having filled his water jug and shaken up his straw for him, Toad was very much the same self-satisfied animal that he had been of old. He sang a little song or two of the sort he used to sing at his dinner parties, curled himself up in the straw, and had an excellent night's rest and the pleasantest of dreams. They had many interesting talks together after that, as the dreary days went on, and the jailer's daughter grew very sorry for Toad, and thought it a great shame that a poor little animal should be locked up in prison for what seemed to her a very unimportant crime. Toad, of course, in his vanity, thought that her interest in him came from a growing tenderness, and he could not help half regretting that the social gulf between them was so very wide, for she was a pretty lass and evidently admired him very much. One morning the girl was very thoughtful and did not seem to Toad to be paying proper attention to his witty sayings and sparkling comments. "Toad," she said presently, "just listen, please. I have an aunt who is a washerwoman." "There, there," said Toad. "Never mind, think no more about it. I have several aunts who ought to be washerwomen." "Do be quiet a minute, Toad," said the girl. "You talk too much, that's your chief fault. And I'm trying to think, and you hurt my head. As I said, I have an aunt who is a washerwoman. She does the washing for all the prisoners in this castle. We try to keep any paying business of that sort in the family, you understand. She takes out the washing on Monday morning and brings it on Friday evening. This is a Thursday. Now, this is what occurs to me. You're very rich, at least you're always telling me so, and she's very poor. A few pounds wouldn't make any difference to you, and it would mean a lot to her. Now, I think if she were properly approached, squared, I believe, is the word you animals use, you could come to some arrangement by which she would let you have her dress and bonnet and so on, and you could escape from the castle as the official washerwoman. You're very alike in many respects, particularly about the figure." "We're not," said the Toad in a huff. "I have a very elegant figure for what I am." "So has my aunt," replied the girl, "for what she is. But have it your own way, you horrid, proud, ungrateful animal, when I'm sorry for you and trying to help you." Yes, that's all right. Thank you very much indeed," said the Toad hurriedly. "But look here, you wouldn't surely have Mr. Toad of Toad Hall going about the country disguised as a washerwoman?" "Then you can stop here as a toad," replied the girl with much spirit. "I suppose you want to go off in a horse-driven coach." Honest Toad was always ready to admit himself in the wrong. "You are a good, kind, clever girl," he said, "and I am indeed a proud and stupid Toad. Introduce me to your worthy aunt, if you will be so kind, and I have no doubt that the excellent lady and I will be able to arrange terms satisfactory to both parties." Next evening the girl took her aunt into Toad's cell, bearing his week's washing pinned up in a towel. The old lady had been prepared beforehand for the interview, and the sight of certain golden coins that Toad had thoughtfully placed on the table in full view practically completed the matter and left little further to discuss. In return for his cash, Toad received a cotton print gown, an apron, a shawl. Right, there's a picture of the washerwoman, who kind of looks like Toad. A shawl and a black bonnet. The only demand the old lady made was that she should be gagged and bound and dumped in a corner. By this trick, she explained, no one would think she had helped Toad escape. Toad was delighted with the suggestion. It would enable him to leave the prison in some style, and with his reputation for being a desperate, dangerous fellow unharmed. And he readily helped the jailer's daughter to make her aunt appear as much as possible the victim of circumstances over which she had no control. "Now it's your turn, Toad," said the girl. "Take off that coat and waistcoat of yours. You're fat enough as it is." Shaking with laughter, she proceeded to dress him in the cotton print gown, arranged a shawl around him, and tied the strings of the bonnet under his chin. "You're the very image of her," she giggled. "Only I'm sure you never looked half so respectable in all your life before. Now, goodbye, Toad, and good luck. Go straight down the way you came up, and if anyone says anything to you, as they probably will, being but men, you can answer back a bit, of course, but remember, you're a widow woman, quite alone in the world." With a quaking heart, but as firm a footstep as he could command, Toad set forth, but he was soon agreeably surprised to find how easy everything was made for him. The washerwoman's dumpy figure in its familiar cotton print seemed a passport for every barred door and grim gateway. Even when he hesitated, uncertain as to the right turning to take, he found himself helped out of his difficulty by the warder at the next gate, anxious to be off to his tea. It seemed hours before he crossed the last courtyard, rejected the pressing invitations from the last guard room, and dodged the outspread of arms of the last warder, pleading for just one farewell embrace. But at last he heard the wicket gate in the great outdoor click behind him, felt the fresh air of the outer world upon his brow, and knew that he was free. Okay, look at Toad dressed up as the washerwoman. Pretty funny. Dizzy with the easy success of his daring exploit, he walked quickly toward the lights of the town, not knowing in the least what he should do next, only quite certain of one thing, that he must remove himself as quickly as possible from the neighborhood. As he walked along considering, his attention was caught by some red and green lights a little way off, to one side of the town, and the sound of the puffing and snorting of engines and the banging of shunted trucks fell on his ear. "Aha," he thought, "this is a piece of luck. A railway station is the thing that I want most in the world at this moment." He made his way to the station, looked at a timetable, and found that a train, bound more or less in the direction of his home, was due to start in half an hour. "More luck," said Toad, his spirits rising rapidly, and went off to the booking office to buy his ticket. He gave the name of the station that he knew to be nearest to Toad Hall and put his fingers in search of the necessary money where his waistcoat pocket should have been. But here the cotton gown, which had nobly stood by him so far, frustrated his efforts. In a sort of nightmare, he struggled with a strange thing that seemed to hold his hands and laugh at him all the time, while other travelers, forming up in a line behind, waited with impatience, making suggestions of more or less value. At last, somehow, he never rightly understood how, he burst the barriers, arrived at where all waistcoat pockets are always situated, and found not only no money, but no pocket to hold it, and no waistcoat to hold the pocket. To his horror, he remembered that he'd left both coat and waistcoat behind him in his cell, and with them his pocketbook, money, keys, watch, matches, pencil case, all that makes life worth living, all that sets the many-pocketed animal above the inferior one-pocketed or no-pocketed types. In his misery, he made one desperate effort to carry the thing off, and with the return of his old fine manner, he said, "Look here, I find I've left my purse behind. Just give me that ticket, will you? And I'll send the money on tomorrow. I'm well known in these parts." The clerk stared at him and the black bonnet a moment and then laughed. "I should think you were pretty well known in these parts," he said. "If you ever tried this game on often. Hey, stand away from the window, please, madam. You're blocking the other passengers." An old gentleman who had been prodding him in the back for some moments here thrust him away, and what was worse, addressed him as his good woman, which angered Toad more than anything that had happened that evening. Baffled and full of despair, he wandered blindly down the platform where the train was standing, and tears trickled down each side of his nose. It was very hard, he thought, to be within sight of safety and almost at home, and to be beaten by not having any money. Very soon his escape would be discovered. The hunt would be up, he would be caught, loaded with chains, dragged back again to prison, and bread and water and straw, and oh, what sarcastic remarks the girl would make. What was to be done? He was not swift of foot. His figure was unfortunately recognizable. Could he not squeeze under the seat of a carriage? He had seen this method used by schoolboys when the journey money provided by thoughtful parents had been diverted to other and better ends. As he pondered, he found himself opposing the engine, which was being oiled and wiped by its affectionate driver, a burly man with an oil can in one hand and a lump of rag in the other. "Hello, mother," said the engine driver. "What's the trouble? You don't look particularly cheerful." "Oh, sir," said Toad, crying afresh, "I'm a poor unhappy washerwoman, and I've lost all my money and can't pay for a ticket, and I must get home tonight somehow, and whatever I am to do I don't know. Oh dear, oh dear." "That's a bad business indeed," said the engine driver. "Lost your money, can't get home, and got some kids too waiting for you, I dare say." "Any amount of them," sobbed Toad, "and they'll be hungry and playing with matches and upsetting lamps and the little innocents and quarrelling and going on generally. Oh dear, oh dear." "Well, I'll tell you what I'll do," said the good engine driver. "You're a washerwoman to your trade, says you. Very well, that's it. And I'm an engine driver, as you may see, and there's no denying it's terribly dirty work." There's the engine driver. Uses up a power of shirts, it does, till my missus is fair tired of washing them. If you'll wash a few shirts for me when you get home and send them along, I'll give you a ride on my engine. It's against the company regulations, but we're not so very particular in these out-of-the-way parts." The toad's misery turned into rapture as he eagerly scrambled up into the cab of the engine. Of course, he had never washed a shirt in his life and couldn't if he tried, and anyhow he wasn't going to begin. But he thought, when I get safely home to Toad Hall and have money again and pockets to put it in, I will send the engine driver enough to pay for quite a quantity of washing, and that will be the same thing or better. And that's where we're going to stop today. Toad back on the train, escaping to get his freedom. So, see you tomorrow. Have fun doing the rest of your homework and playing and maybe reading some more. And stay tuned for part 12, I think it is, of Wind in the Willows. See you tomorrow. Bye.